A glance beyond the corporeal showed me the lingering remains of the
And
man's
we
soul fusing.
are live. Hello, everybody. Justin Thomas James here with another recording of Dead Tired, written by Raven's Dagger. I am very excited to be narrating this project. I've done my pre-read, and it's a lot of fun. Really great characters, fun storyline, and yeah, I'm really happy to be here. So, if you are here right now at the ungodly hour of 8:30 a.m., thank you for being here. If you are not here, then I don't know how you're hearing this right now, but hello. Hello to you and your strange superpowers. Um, yeah, this is part two of the storyline. I recorded a little bit yesterday, just getting my bearings, setting some things up. So today we should be hitting the ground running pretty well. I'm just going to do a little quick test to make sure that the audio is coming through okay. Let me just listen in on my laptop here. Testing, testing. Testing, one, two, three, four. Ah, I mean, I think it's sounding good. If you're listening in and you're hearing crackles or weird noises that you don't think should be there, just pop into the comments, let me know. Also, if you're here, say hello. I would love to see just who's here and who's watching, and yeah, it's really it's all about that community. Tuesday morning crew. Who's the crew? Who do we got in the crew? We got Empyreon 42. Thank you very much for being here, Empyreon. Very nice to have you. Robin Tucker coming through on YouTube. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, again, if you are here, shout out in the comments, pop off. I will do my best to say hello. I try to really focus on narration, so if it takes a while for me to get back to you and greet you, don't worry about it. I usually take a break every 5 minutes or so, so I'll turn my head and say hello at that point. But yeah, if you're here on YouTube, if you're here on Twitch, if you're here on Facebook, welcome, 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 welcome. All right. Well, what do we have here? So, if you are new to this stream, I'll give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Well, my name is Justin Thomas James. I probably should have said that at the beginning. But yeah, I'm an audiobook narrator working with Sound Booth Theater. And if you're here on YouTube, you probably already assumed that much. We've got, well, you already, obviously, we've got the Dead Tired book available on Amazon. You can pick up the ebook. Obviously, the audiobook is not available yet, but hopefully in the next couple months it will be ready to go. And yes, behind the curtains, this is the program we use. You see above me. This is Ableton Live. Ableton is a piece of software that a lot of DJs use, actually, a lot of musicians. And it turns out at Sound Booth Theater, we are mostly musicians. So it just was a system that made a lot of sense for us. And yeah, if you have any questions about Ableton or what I'm doing here, please, go ahead and ask in the comments. This recording that I'm doing right now is what we call a cold read. You are going to see me sweat and struggle with this script for the first time, reading it out loud, getting the character voice, grappling with different accents or effects or whatever. You're gonna see all of that kind of in real time. This is part two. Part one should be uploaded by now on the YouTube channel, but if it's not, I'll take a look afterwards. Yeah, it's just a rough sort of recording. You'll be able to listen to this after the fact here on YouTube for a while before we actually make the audiobook go live, and then also on the Sound Booth Theater app. Which, if you don't have this app yet, I highly recommend you go check it out if you like audiobooks, particularly sci-fi, fantasy, lit RPG sort of realm, because we offer a lot of free stuff. You can get the first book of Eternal Dominion for free. We've got a lot of free short stories on there. If you're just looking for some Sound Booth Theater attention or some Sound Booth Theater performance, and you don't want to pay for it right now, you just, something for, a hour-long drive or something like that, It's great for that. You know, you pick up a lot of free stuff. We've got the first episode of all of our cinematic or audio immersion tunnels, as we call them now. The first episodes are free, so if you want to check it out, if you like sound effects and music, all those bells and whistles, that fun stuff in your audiobooks, you can find that at Sound Booth Theater. So go check that out. Oh God, I mean, this isn't just a stream of plugs, I promise. Let me take a sip of coffee before I get into the Facebook. Facebook groups. If you're on Facebook, would love it if you joined the Sound Booth Theater Live Facebook group. We got a great community there that's growing every day, and everybody there loves Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I think is also something that you guys probably have in common. If you're here because of Dungeon Crawler Carl, then yeah, definitely let me know. Why are you here? What series brought you to Sound Booth Theater? I would love to know that if you just want to share in the chat wherever you are. But yes, check out the Sound Booth Theater Live Facebook group. Also, if you would give my page a follow, Justin Thomas James Creations. I know the name is a bit tacky. I'm still working on a name that's, just me. I might just keep it JTJ or Justin Thomas James or JTJ Productions. I don't know. But Justin Thomas James Creations is such a... It's like an audiobook in and of itself. So, who else do we have here? We've got Daniel Daniel Hoper, who says, it's almost midnight here, so it looks like I'll be reading this as bedtime story. Perfect. A nice little spooky bedtime story for you. Bruce Craft, hello to you. Imperion says, why I love Sound Booth, love LitRPG and GameLit. Well, there you go. Head on over to the app and go ahead and download a bunch of, free stuff within that. Devtron is here. Hello, Devtron. Devtron is huge in our Discord. Another area, if you like to interact with community on Discord, that's we've got a Discord. You can check that out. I think it's in the description, so you can find that there. Yeah, ELLC and Donut for sure. SBT has some great free introductions into stories. Yes, thank you, 0 Point. Just met 0 Point the other day. Really, really nice having you. And DCC was your first SBT, and you're here because you caught the Arcane recording. Yes, that's you caught me during that. Just like a little tiny window, you caught me, because that was only 2 sessions, I think. All right, well, it's been long enough. It's been 7 minutes and 45 seconds since the stream started. Why don't we get to some narration? Okay, let's get the script up. That's important. All right, and I'm going to listen to a little bit of this last chunk of narration just to kind of get back into the head of Harold, our favorite Lich, multiple thousands of year old Lich.
They seemed not to react to our passing, so it was quite possible that as undead, we simply were not on the figurative menu. It did make for a wonderful reason to avoid the area. Perhaps that was why I had been undisturbed so long, why civilization had not marched its way to my doorstep. After doing some marching of our own for some time, I unfortunately grew quite bored. I wanted to see civilization once more, to see the progress humanity and the other intelligent races had made. I could imagine great spires and bountiful lands, machines that did the work of 100 farmers so that resources would be plentiful and the common man could spend the evenings in joyful...
All right, so he's talking more up here. Kind of a nasally sort of voice, which I don't know if that makes sense because he doesn't have a nose, clearly from that picture. But this is the sort of thing that I'm going for. The characters that I have in mind, or the actors, or the personas that I'm kind of thinking of, is a little bit of Steve Buscemi from you know him from Reservoir Dogs, and what's the other one? He's in Monsters Inc. Actually, I was thinking about Monsters Inc. when I was doing these voices. He plays Randall in Monsters Inc. So kind of like more of a nasally voice, but also very, he's assertive. He knows what he's talking about.
But then there's also a little bit of Billy Crystal, I think. A little bit of, because he's kind of got a flair as well, this dead tired guy. And again, these aren't actual impersonations. I'm not fully leaning into a impression of these actors or personas. More of it is just trying to get the essence of the character. What is it? I mean, how do they enunciate? How do they emphasize their sentences and make their points? You know, that sort of thing. I hear a little bit of John Mulaney as well. I don't know if you guys know John Mulaney, the comedian. I don't really know him all that well. I've only seen him a couple times, but there's something about the attitude that's just kind of, it's just a dry sort of wit that he just is like, okay, well, that's something. Yeah, I don't know. I probably can come up with a better example than that. But John Mulaney as well. And then another actor, maybe this is too many, I'm being pulled in too many directions, but there's one more who I'm thinking of. He's also kind of a comedian who comes to mind, and he's Canadian as well, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but this is Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald, and this is mostly, this isn't for the whole time, but when Harold has sarcastic lines, doing a Norm Macdonald kind of really works. And there's something about it that the way he kind of hesitates on what he's saying and he enunciates, he emphasizes certain words. I kind of like that for this character. So I'm doing a little bit of Norm Macdonald as well. Baby J, who is Baby J? I really don't know much about pop culture. I must say I'm very well cast as a 2,000-year-old lich, because pop culture that's been asleep for the past 2,000 years, because I do not know who Baby J is. Oh, Baby J is John Mulaney. Okay, there we go. There we go. That's I see. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, good. I'm glad you picked that up then too. All right, let's keep on going. Now, the other thing that I want to keep in mind here is that this is an audiobook. This isn't actually a stage performance. And, you know, something that can happen if you're thinking of people who are, you know, constantly on stage. Billy Crystal's always on stage. John Mulaney's always on stage. Norm Macdonald's always on stage, like Saturday Night Live or whatever. You know, Steve Buscemi's more of an actor. So I think that... Thank you, Scar. Thank you. That's flattering. Extremely flattering. Thank you for telling me that I don't look a day over 1,500. I'm assuming you mean years. Either way, I thank you. I am just a bag of bones here. Technically, we all are. I look just as old as you do, deep down, if you strip all the layers off, I suppose. Yeah, so the thing that I need to remember to keep in mind is that this is an audiobook. This is not a stage. I'm not on a stage with people, so I need to, and probably this is going to be easier to do when thinking of Steve Buscemi, because most of the times I've seen Billy Crystal, or, well, maybe Billy Crystal's kind of in the between, but John Mulaney for sure, and Norm Macdonald for sure, is when they're performing, they're talking to an audience, and we got to make sure that the audience is actually just one person. And hopefully you can hear it, that I'm trying to shift my voice and the way I'm speaking so that it's I'm just speaking to you. I'm not speaking to anybody else. And I'm still a lich. I'm still, you know, the same character, but, you know, what happens when you get John Mulaney off stage and he's sitting there and he's talking to you and he's sharing his deepest thoughts and ideas with you? It's not going to sound like this. I'm John Mulaney, Baby J, apparently. It's not going to sound like this. He's going to be, you know, speaking more intimately. It's also better for my voice if I'm doing it this way because, yeah, so listening back to the first couple chapters, you know, I might actually go back and re-record these depending on how much time we have, just because I know that I was trying to get into the character and I was not thinking about the intimacy as much. Either way, that's one thing I'm going to try to keep in mind, is that I'm just talking to you, right? And sometimes I might
go a little bit louder and, as just a regular conversation goes. But yeah, let's lean into more of an intimate sort of feel, especially because it's first person. These are intimate thoughts. Ah, blah, blah, blah. All right. Take a sip of water. Very important. And again, anybody here, if you do hear any crackling, there are some times where it's not my microphone, it's actually my audio setup, trying to get the audio visual into StreamYard and then streaming. Sometimes the audio will bug. So if you start to hear crackles and it's getting distracting, just let me know and I'll do a quick restart of some stuff and it should be fine after that. Okay, here we go. Chapter 4. A Hint of Civilization. I'm not angry. No, it would be... I'm not angry. No, it would take a... I'm not angry, no. No, it would take a lot more than some misinformation and society-wide idiocy. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. No, it would take a lot more than some misinformation and society-wide idiocy to make me angry. I'm merely, disappointed. In you, in the world you've created, in everyone that followed along. In everyone that followed along. Beginning of every chapter. Not sure how familiar you are with Dead Tired by Raven's Dagger. Who here has read any Raven's Dagger? Is this, do we have any Raven's Dagger fans here? Anyways, the beginnings of these chapters, they all start with a little quote, as if like we're in the future and he's talking to an audience. He's talking to someone. He's giving like a lecture. But it's just a mere quote, so you just get a little bit of a piece of the future, and then you go into the main storyline, the main narrative. Our brisk walk had me passing the first few farms in no time at all. They weren't very impressive farms. A few homes, little more than shacks, with thatch roofs and walls made of clay bricks and thatch. Not terribly nice to look at, and I imagined they were just as uncomfortable to live in. These homes were dotted here and there across the hilly countryside, with emaciated barn animals grazing around them. These homes were dotted here and there across the hilly countryside, with emaciated barn animals grazing around them, and some fenced-off gardens filled with all sorts of plants spaced seemingly. And some fenced-off gardens filled with all sorts of plants spaced seemingly at random. Farming was one of those things that I had never truly cared to study all that much. There was only so much playing with manure I could do for science before I would find something more lucrative to do. There was only so much playing with manure I could do for science before I would find something more lucrative to do. The people out in those fields had wide-brimmed hats made of a yellowish plant woven together, and seemed to disregard Alex and I with little more than a glance. To be fair, we were quite a ways away from any of them, and coming from a direction with no obvious road. I would have to see how people reacted to our undeath when we got closer.
"Look, Sir Papa, a road!"
Alex said as he pointed out ahead. God, I love that. I love Alex.
"Oh, look, Papa, look, a road. Oh! Look, Sir Papa, a road!"
Alex.
"Look, Sir Papa, a road!"
So Alex, for those who are unaware, Alex is Harold, the Lich's butler, who he just made. He obviously, our Protagonist is a Lich and is able to raise the undead as a necromancer, and he killed some adventurer kind of accidentally, and then also killed this prowler beast that was stalking him. And so he created a butler, and mixed the prowler beast with the adventurer, and so now he's got this cat hybrid mutant that is following him around. Um, One thing that I love and is very endearing is that you've got the personality of both the cat prowler and the adventurer, and the prowler was female, the adventurer was male, and yeah, Warcraft 2 peasant. That's right, 0 point. And then together those personalities are mingling. So this butler actually has strong tendencies to want to be more of a maid, which is done in a really cute and fun and endearing, loving way. Alex said as he pointed out ahead. My butler moved on ahead of me, skipping. My butler moved on ahead of me, skipping in a terribly undignified way, until he landed with both feet atop a road of beaten earth. There were hints of cobbles here and there on the path, but little else. There was a lot you could tell about a country from its road. There was a lot you could tell about a country from its roads, I found. They were the lifelines of a city, the things that allowed people to travel and thrive. Knowledge, more often than not, traveled along. Knowledge, more often than not, traveled along these paths. To see a road so pitted and poorly made, not to mention so poorly maintained, it didn't bode well for the intelligence of the local leaders. It didn't bode well for the intelligence of the local leaders. I tapped my Oxfords together and used a minor cantrip to clean off the muck from them, I tapped my Oxfords together and used a minor cantrip to clean off the muck from them and the hem of my pants. Oh, by the way, I should turn on my Pomodoro timer. Reminds me when to drink water. I tapped my Oxfords together and used a minor cantrip to clean off the muck from them and the hem of my pants. Tweed was a wonderful material, but dust did tend to cling to it rather ferociously at times. Let's keep on going, Alex, my boy.
Yes, Bone Papa, sir.
We were just coming. Let me do that one again.
Yes, Bone Papa, sir.
We were just coming close enough to the town proper to make out its walls when we encountered a little group of people coming our way. I would ordinarily have assumed them to be travelers, but their garb was strange. Now, to be entirely fair, I wouldn't expect something as fickle as fashion to remain the same over any prolonged period. Just in my lifetime and subsequent unlifetime, there had been great shifts in the manner by which... Just in my lifetime and subsequent unlifetime, there had been great shifts in the manner by which people dressed. The lower-classed folk tended to change very little with time, but the working class, the merchant families, and those who congregated in cities tended to have styles and phases in their choice of clothes that would change quite sporadically. The nobility were generally far more fickle, of course. These young men wore outfits that were downright bizarre. Long coats with trailing tails made of some sort of leather, with tall collars that circled around the lower half of their faces. They all had longer hair, tied in intricate braids that fell to the small of their backs, and great billowing sleeves that they folded into each other with their arms crossed. Most intriguing of all were the many canisters around their waists, only partially hidden by their leather coats.
Most intriguing of all were the many canisters around their waists, only partially hidden by their leather coats. Weapons? Perhaps vials used for collecting samples? Perhaps vials used for collecting samples? Were these the scientists of the modern era? Their coats would certainly offer some rudimentary protection from some volatile chemicals. Their coats would certainly offer some rudimentary protection from some volatile chemicals, though their sleeves would be a liability in a laboratory. I reached out a hand and pressed it to the center of Alex's back. Greater word of lexicography. Translate. Greater word of lexicography. Translate.
Boom, 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 boom.
Translate. The burst of magic had Alex wobbling a bit with his next few steps. The burst of magic had Alex wobbling a bit with his next few steps, and he turned towards me with an open question in his glowing eyes. A translation spell, I explained, so that we can be understood, and vice versa. There's no greater loss than that bought by... So that we can be understood, and vice versa. There's no greater loss than that brought by poor communication.
So, I can talk to people? Oh, I think I might like talking to people.
I've no doubt, I said. Do you know how a butler should behave before strangers? Alex's back straightened, and he held himself differently. Taller, more noble. Even his expression flattened to one of bored interest. Even his expression flattened to one of bored interest.
Yes,
He said.
I need to be very polite to the guests of Sir Bone Papa Daddy Papa Bone. I need to be very polite to the guests of Sir Papa Bone Daddy.
Indeed, I said. For all of Alex's accent. Break time! Little break. Little sip. Streambonker, Streambonker, are you still there? Did you send me an email? Or is it, did you send one to Soundbooth? Streambonker! Yeah, it's a great cover. It's a really great... Hey! Did you send me an email? I'm not sure if you sent it to me or if you sent it to Soundbooth. What was your email? I'm also not sure who you are, if you have a different identity over email than on YouTube, I said. For all of Alex's eccentricities, he did seem to understand the role he was created for. I could endure a bit of strangeness if he was capable of handling his duties with an appropriate level of seriousness and diligence. I made sure I was presentable myself before continuing on towards the 3 young men out ahead of us. When we were only a few dozen necrometers away from the young men, When we were only a few dozen necrometers away from the young men, the young men came to a stop. I could see eyes narrowing and postures shifting subtly as they took us in. Alex seemed to garner some attention, but not nearly as much as myself. They could probably observe my level. Yes, I suppose that I didn't often appear as fearsome as my level would indicate. Greetings! Greetings, I said. The men looked at each other. Then one of them stepped up.
A talking skeleton, huh? You've made a grave mistake coming to the Empire, undead one.
That was informative. 3 key pieces of information jumped out to me. First, they didn't have a way to properly observe the difference in strength between us. First, they didn't have a way to properly observe the difference in strength between us. Second, they seemed to have some sort of prejudice against the undead. Not terribly uncommon, that. And third, the region. Second, they seemed to have some sort of prejudice against the undead. Second, they seemed to have some sort of prejudice against the undead. Not terribly uncommon, that. And third, the region. Was part of some sort of empire. Not a kingdom, though that wasn't mutually exclusive. The form of government they had would need some further speculation, but it was hardly the time for that. "I beg your pardon," I said quite politely. "My butler Alex here and I are merely passing through. We're on the lookout for a library, perhaps a store from which I could purchase some reading material. I assure you I mean no harm."
Senior. A talking skeleton, huh? You've made a grave mistake coming to the Empire, undead one. Senior Brother Jan, we should take its head. Senior Brother Jan, we should take its head. The sect master would reward us, I think. Senior Brother Jan, we should take its head. The sect master would reward us, I think,
one of the young men said. The other tilted his head to the side. "Would our poisons work on it?" The one in the lead, the so-called Yen, nodded.
Would our poisons work on it?
The one in the lead, the so-called Yan, nodded. The one in the lead, the so-called...
Would our poisons work on it? Would our poisons work on it? Would our poisons work on it?
The one in the lead, the so-called Yan, nodded.
The poisons of the 4 Venom sect go beyond just the material. Remember your Tao, junior brothers.
Were they ignoring me? That was rather rude. Alex cleared his throat.
Please forgive us, new friends, but you seem to be under the impression that we wish you ill. That is not the case. Magic Bone Papa said so.
I observed one of the gentlemen to the side of the group pulling his arm out of his sleeve before flicking it forwards. 2 needles flew out of his grasp and moved. 2 needles flew out of his grasp and moved with decent speed across the space between us, both, surprisingly, aimed towards Alex. I carefully plucked one out of the air to better observe it. And let the other plunge into my butler. It would allow me to verify the claim that their poisons truly did work on the undead. The needle had an interesting tip with something of a divot in it. The poison seemed to be oil-based, at least judging by its viscosity. Oh, forgot to take my break there. Face blue smiling. Hello, Edward. Necrometer. Oh, Orestes! Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I yeah, I was trying to reply to all of them. I must have missed you there.
Did you listen to Dungeon in the Clouds?
The poison seemed to be oil-based, at least judging by its viscosity. The poison seemed to be oil-based, at least judging by its viscosity.
Oil of the scrub peon. Oil of the scrub peon. Enhanced injury poison. DC -6. 1d6 plus 2 per hour. Duration based on con save. Interesting. Interesting. Weak and interesting. Weak and possibly debilitating, but not overly so, and not something that I would expect to work on any kind of undead. There was more to it, though, an ability that the young man had used when throwing his needles that made them more effective. Some sort of rogue ability? Are you well, Alex? My butler fished the needle out of his clothes. It had failed to pierce his skin, unfortunately, so I would be unable to see its effects on his It had failed to pierce his skin, unfortunately, so I would be unable to see its effects on his constitution. Oh well. You are trespassing in the land of the sect. You are trespassing on the land of the sect. You are trespassing on the land of the sect! Yan shouted. It was quite unnecessary. We were hardly that far apart. Prepare to die! Prepare to die, undead scum! For the Emperor! For the Emperor! His chums screamed as they darted about. Judging by the rapidity... Oh, nice. Oh, thanks, 0 Point.
Judging by the rapidity...
Oh, the last email you got, aside 7 years... 6th of July. Oh, okay. No Dungeons in the Clouds. That's weird. I swear that I sent it to you. You should have gotten one. I'll take a look at this afterwards. Orestes.
Judging by the rapidity...
Thank you for letting me know. Sometimes the email system that I have gets all screwy-looey. Prepare to die, undead scum! For the Emperor! His chums screamed as they darted about. Judging by the rapidity of their motions and the way they handled their weapons, mostly needles and one whip, they were quite obviously little more than children. Word of power! Sleep! 3 bodies hit the ground. I sighed to myself. What a pointless waste of time. What a pointless waste of time. Come on, Alex. Come along, Alex. We should move on.
Should we tuck them in to sleep?
Alex asked. I paused. There was no point in wasting any more time with these 3 rude young men than I had. They would awaken. They would awaken eventually and be little the worse for it. Perhaps they would even learn a lesson. This region didn't seem all that dangerous either. So close to the populated town, the likelihood... So close to a populated town, the likelihood of them being brutalized by a predatory animal was slight, and I couldn't imagine there being any bandits in such... that many bandits in such a small place. On the other hand, I could learn much by going through their possessions. In the end, it was common decency and the nearness to the town that decided things for me. Let's just keep going, Alex.
Okay,
Alex agreed easily. Our random encounter completed, and no real adventure was complete without one, we continued on our way to the town. Though as we approached, I found that calling it a town might be something of a misnomer.
The walls, about 3 necrometers high, were of mortared stone, with a small tiled roof running above them. There were a few buildings along the exterior, but most of the village? But most of the village, or perhaps a... There were a few buildings along the exterior. There were a few buildings along the exterior, but most of the village, or perhaps a small city, was contained within these walls. A portion of it was atop a hill to one side, mostly a compound of sorts that had the airs of a very strange castle, with pagodas and greater walls around it. 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 The residence of the local nobility? The residence of the local nobility, perhaps? A lake sat across from the town. A lake sat across from the town, and I could make out a few little boats with triangular sails skimming along the surface, some trailing nets behind them. So, the local diet was no doubt supplemented by fish, as well as what was grown in the meager farms, and perhaps some food was imported from elsewhere. And perhaps some food was imported from elsewhere. The gate we approached was guarded by 2 men in plain brown clothes, each holding a spear by their side. They straightened at our approach, then looked somewhat taken aback. When they examined Alex and me. "Greetings," I said. "Do you fine gentlemen perhaps know the location of the bookstore? Do you fine gentlemen perhaps know the location of the local bookstore?" One of them lowered his spear at me.
Go tell the elder! 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 Go tell the elder!
He said. This is all quite unnecessary. I said. I had the impression that my words were not being received. The younger guard dropped his weapon and scampered off in a hurry, while the elder of the 2 lunged at me with his spear. Alex, being a dutiful butler, caught the weapon by the haft and stopped it, and the guard. Alex, being a dutiful butler, caught the weapon by the haft and stopped it and the guard mid-lunge. Thank you, Alex. Could you please set the fine gentleman aside for now? I suspect there will be no more negotiating. Our entry peacefully otherwise.
Okay,
Alex said. He cleared his throat and regarded the guard.
We are terribly sorry to intrude. Good sir, but Bone Papa Harold and I need to enter your fine city for matters of business.
Alex grabbed the man by the breastplate, lifted him up, and set him next to the road.
Please don't interfere.
I nodded at the job well done and stepped past. At last, I was within the city proper. Now, to find a proper disguise to avoid further complications, and to find a reliable source of knowledge, if there was one to be found. I was beginning to have my doubts. Hey, there we go. That's the end of Chapter 4.
Beauty, beauty, beauty. All right. All right, quick question between chapters. Who here's got pets? Anybody here have pets? Who's got pets? I have a cat named Piper. She's about 10 years old. She is a tabby cat, and she is very neurotic. I would say is the best way I would put it. She's got this habit of at night she has this pattern where she'll be on the bed. We'll get into bed. She'll jump off the bed. Then she'll run downstairs. All the lights are off, and then she'll start meowing really, really loudly until we call her to come back to the bed. That's just one of her little twitches. All right, we got Orestes has a dog named Chibi, and he's a poodle. Like a big-sized poodle, like the big, floofy, cuddly ones. 0 Point has two cats or two pets. And Orestes says she's like a vampire. She needs to be invited in. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's Piper. I do wonder sometimes if our house is haunted and that's what she's doing. She's like warding off the goats. The goats? That's even creepier than ghosts. Just random demon goats in our house. Devtron says, skin the cat. I will not. Unless that's a reference to something. Unless your cat's name is Skin. That's a fun name for a cat. Well, he's a medium-sized poodle, but he's a bit of a chubby boy. 15 kilos. Okay, all right. Chonky. And 0 Point says he's got a 6-year-old long-haired orange tabby named Cheddar. Is okay, and a 7-year-old Roddy named Betty. Oh, sweet. I love Roddies. But also, orange cats are crazy. I don't know if Cheddar's like this, but every orange cat I meet has just this special cat energy that is wild. Devtron messaged me on Discord, actually. I just remembered. And let's see, JTJ chat. Oh, wow. What is this? This is... Oh, World of Warcraft. Oh, nice. Oh, this is the VR. Oh, cool. Wow. Right on. Okay, so Devtron just sent me a message where he's got his VR open, and it's like multiple monitors. So he's got using VR, he's playing World of Warcraft, and then he has another window open. Looks like it's some sort of chat, and then he's got the stream open, and he can turn his head and look around at the different things. Yeah, you're right. This is going to change the way we work. Big time. Edward P. says, cleaning my kitchen, all I could hear every time you were voice the dude reminded me of the peons peasants from, yeah, Warcraft 3. Yes, my lord. Yes, my lord. That's probably subconsciously where I'm getting it from, honestly. 0 Point says, Roddy uses dog door, but only if you stand at the door to call her in and out. Yep. Orange cats are famous before single-cell organisms. We have a local orange cat that, single cell. You have an orange kitten named Ganon. Oh, that's cute. He's a nutter. Cheddar is the chillest of the chill. She's pretty great. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, the working against the stereotype. All right. Well, that's enough pet chat. Then we get back into narration. Oh, 1 minute here. Someone's knocking on my door. Who could it be? Oh, it's Nikki. Got the... It's all working right. It's all... it looks like... Here, let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, that's what... Here, it's this. That's what it looks like. My partner has come in to investigate my stream setup. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, nice and simple. Cooler. Still could use some. Yes. La 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 la. Moving bars. Yeah, yeah. We were just talking about Piper actually, and her evening habits, and someone suggested that she might be a vampire because we have to invite her into the bed.
That's something. That might be true.
Yeah, it might be true. It might be true. Not right now. Not right now. I got to get to narrating. All right. See you in a bit. That's Nikki, everybody. And I'll bring her onto the stream at some point, and you guys could say hello proper. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. A novel idea. You would think that despite all the many, many faults in this civilization of yours, people in it would still learn that arrogance isn't the wisest choice. You would think that despite all the many, many faults in this civilization of yours, people in it would still learn that arrogance isn't the wisest course. You would think that despite all the many, many faults in this civilization of yours, people in it would still learn that arrogance... You would think that despite all the many, many faults in this civilization of yours, people in it would still learn that arrogance isn't the wisest course. Why do I keep on thinking? Isn't the wisest course. But no, of course not. But no, of course not. But no, of course not. I like that one. There we go. I can hear Piper strutting down the hallway, wondering where Nikki went. What's going on here? Go away. Just a little pop-up. Ooh. I'll drink some water. The town was a bit of a mess. I mean that in the kindest way, of course. I once had a peer in the sciences who had a family, you see. I always found such things to get in the way of research of my studies. I always found such things to get in the way of research and my studies. But this man found the sacrifice in time worth it for his own reasons. I don't judge. His work was still very much acceptable. On one occasion, when I met him to discuss some face tits, we went to discuss some face tits of his research. On one occasion, I don't think that's the word that I'm supposed to say. I don't think that's check the Merriam-Webster, but I don't believe face tits is the pronunciation that I should be using here. On one occasion, when I met him to discuss some facets of his... On one occasion, when I met him to discuss some facets of his research, I discovered that he had some strange diagrams in his laboratories. These, as it turned out, were the scribbles of his children, of which he was quite proud. They were very inaccurate and poorly made, but they showed a willingness to dip into the arcane arts from a young age that
but they showed a willingness to dip into the arcane arts from a young age that made the man quite proud. Walking around the town reminded me, in a sort of twisted way of that memory. There were so many signs that the small city could have been improved. There were so many signs that the small city could have been improved. They had a very basic system of gutters along the streets, yet some of their architecture hinted at actual... They had a very basic system of gutters along the streets, yet some of their architecture hinted at actual, capable craftsmen among their ranks. But for all the little signs of brilliance, there was just so much that was wrong. Yet, for all their little signs of brilliance, there was just so much that was wrong. The streets had filth along their sides. The people Alex and I crossed were dressed in little more than rags. The section of the town nearest the docks, the one that I would ordinarily have labeled the slums, the section of the people Alex and I crossed, the section of the town nearest the docks, the one that I would ordinarily have labeled the slum. The section of the town nearest the docks, the one that I would... The section of the town nearest the docks, the one that I would ordinarily have labeled as the slums, took up half the town. There were so many signs that the local governance just didn't care. Was it a sign? Was it a sign that there was a great amount of inequality or stupidity in the upper ranks? It might have been too early to judge. Upon entering the town proper, I pulled Alex to one side and half hid behind a small outhouse near the gates and observed to one side. Upon entering the town proper, I pulled Alex to one side and half hid behind a small outhouse near the gates and observed some of the normal townsfolk until I had an idea of how they dressed. Word of deceit. Illusion. Our new appearances were nothing too impressive. Plain, if clean robes in the local style. Plain, if clean robes in the local style. Plain, if clean robes in the local style, with minimal embellishments and a sash around the waist to keep everything snug. The locals seemed to prefer looser clothes, possibly on account of the region's temperature. I, of course, chose not to copy the raggedy clothes worn by the poorest citizens I saw. It wouldn't do not to be taken seriously on account of seeming disadvantaged that way. As for our faces, I crafted a rather dull illusion, both of us looking like middle-aged men with dark irises and just a hint of stubble. Nothing special, nothing to make someone glance at us twice. I believe, my boy, that we'll find what we're looking for nearer to the center of this little city, I said.
Of course, Sir Bone Popper Harold,
Alex said.
We should also look for proper lodging for the night.
I considered that for a moment. Neither Alex nor myself required sleep at all. On the other hand, if the locals' dislike of the undead, as unreasonable was as unreasonable as it was in our case, was as profound as I suspected, then finding a place for the night wouldn't be a terrible idea. As long as I had enough reading material to pass the time, then I would be quite pleased. As long as I had enough reading material to pass the time, then I would be quite pleased. I think you might be right, Alex. I said. Alex smiled up at me, his walk turning into a skip for a few steps.
Oh, I'll have some water here. Oh, no, I gotta keep narrating, and then I'll take my break when the bell rings.
steps. The business sector of the city. The business sector of the city. I would need to learn its name. I would need to learn the business sector of the city. I would need to learn its name sooner or later, and whether it was classified as a town, village, or small city in the minds of the locals was little more than a curved street with perhaps 24 was little more than a curved street with perhaps 24 shops on it. Those nearest the side of the town with the harbor were mostly small grocers. Those nearest the side of the town with the harbor were mostly small grocers and a few respectable but small general stores. A smithy sat in the middle, with a few young men, apprentices possibly, banging away at simple tools. The road would have been wide had it not been for the stalls and carts where people in colorful attire were hawking their goods. There were a lot of fish on display, but also there were a lot of fish on display, but also a few places selling vials and small jars filled with products their sellers claimed were potent poisons and antidotes. There were a lot of fish on display, but also a few places selling vials and small jars filled with products their sellers claimed were potent poisons and antidotes. Perhaps the local economy was sustained. Perhaps the local economy was sustained by the sale of such things. The examples of local technology I could see were... All right, little break time. Okay. So, the con happened this past Cyprus Comic Con. Oh, right on. This year, we think we broke through 20,000 attendance. Nice. In a country of less than 1 million is pretty damn great. That's awesome. If it were the right word, we'd have way more researchers. Yeah, that's true. That's referring to, what was it called? What was it? Something about tits. That's all I remember. I just remember the tits part. So Franz Whitman asks, is this book any good? And I'm obviously biased because I'm narrating it. I wouldn't be narrating it if it wasn't any good. Every book has its own kind of strengths, I would say. That's how I like to approach this, and different audiences. This one here is nicely balanced. I would say that the strengths of this book are the prose, the wit, even though there's some really corny, like, skeleton and bone puns, the wit is very nice. I really like the banter between the characters. Yeah, I would say that it feels like it's a very easy read. It flows very nicely, and I have a lot of fun reading it, personally. More so than some books that I have narrated, which I can say honestly. Doesn't necessarily mean those other books are not good, but it's just a different feel, it's a different vibe. This worked really well for me and flows nicely. So, to answer your question, yes, this book is any good. The examples of local technology I could see were disappointing. The examples of local technology I could see were disappointing. It would make sense with the scrublands just outside. I was certain that there were plenty of normally vile natural venoms turned downright evil by the constant infusion of necromantic magics. Aha! I said as I pointed toward the far end. Towards the far end of the shopping district. Nestled between a shop selling clothes that seemed of a nicer cut and a place that I suspected was a brothel was a small shop that had a few books on display behind a glass front. There were scrolls as well, and writing implements. I had a bit of a habit of losing myself while perusing stationery. There was something about a grand choice in nibs and inkwells that pleased my non-existent heart. I believe we've found our place, Alex, I said. I didn't have any of the local currency, small metallic discs with cuts in their center from what I'd seen, but I did have a wealth of gold and jewels and other such frivolities tucked away in a pocket dimension. But I did have a wealth of gold and jewels and other such frivolities tucked away in a pocket dimension. We were approaching the shop when we were faced with a distressing scene. Two young men, both in clothes cut similarly to those of the men we'd just found out of town. Two young men, both in clothes. Two young men, both in clothes. Two young men, both in clothes cut similarly to those of the men we'd met just Pardon me. Cut similarly to those of the men we'd met just out of town, were standing above a young woman who knelt on the ground. Two young men, both in clothes cut similarly to those of the men we'd met just out of town, were standing above a young woman who knelt on the ground. Next to her, a small hound was barking and growling as it tried to defend its master.
"Give it back," one of the boys said. "That is the property of the Four Venom sect. It's not meant for filth like you."
I could see the girl gritting her teeth. "I won't," she said. The it in this case seemed to be a book. The it in this case seemed to be a book that the young lady was clutching close to her chest. One of the young men shoved the girl with the flat of his foot and glared down at her.
"Idiot woman! Idiot 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 woman!"
No one seemed to be doing much, merely walking on, most while very actively pretending that nothing was happening. Not that I blamed them. I would have walked on too, but there was a small issue. Forgive me," I said. The boys looked up, now glaring at me. The boys looked up, now glaring at me as if I had done anything wrong to them. The boys looked up, now glaring at me as if I had done anything to wrong them.
"What do you want?" "That is the property of the Four Venom sect. What do you want, old man?"
one of them asked. Old man? My illusion painted me to seem like I was middle-aged at most. Though, to be fair, I was a few millennia old. I decided to look past the slight. Could you ruffians take the young lady and beat her elsewhere? I'm trying to enter that shop." The boys stiffened up.
"Are you? What do you want, old man? Are you mocking us? Are you mocking us? Are you mocking us?"
one of them asked. No? No?
"What are you saying, huh?"
I had my illusion blink. "I'm saying you're blocking the storefront. If you would just let me pass, you could resume your fun. I'll doubtlessly be in the shop until long after you're done." One of them bristled quite needlessly.
"Are you saying we're slow?"
he asked.
"Are you saying we're slow?"
he asked. I had no idea what he was talking about anymore. He asked. I had no idea what he was talking about anymore. No? No, I'm literally asking you to step aside for no more than a moment. We're disciples of the Four Venom sect, the boy said. That's nice. You're also in my way. I sighed. Truly, it wouldn't... truly, if I knew it would be this much of a bother, I would have just snuck past. Truly, if I knew it would be this much of a... truly, if I knew it would be this much of a bother, I would have snuck past. As novel as this situation is, it's getting between me and some books. I paused. Oh! Novel! Ha! Like a book! Oh! Hey! Oh! Novel! Ha! Like a book! Oh! Hey! One of the young men took offense at my wonderful sense of humor and lunged at me. He didn't make it more than a step before Alex appeared before him and dislocated his jaw with a backhand. He didn't make it more than a step before Alex appeared before him and dislocated his jaw with a backhand. The boy made an interesting gurgling scream as he flopped to the ground and clutched what remained of his lower face.
Oh no,
Alex said.
My clothes are even more dirty now.
No worries. We'll be finding you something more appropriate to wear shortly. You fool! You fool! What are you saying, huh? You fool! You fool! The boy, still standing, said. He whipped out some needles in our general direction. It was sloppy. Had I not acted, half of them would have flown off towards the people behind us, perhaps even hitting some unimportant civilian. I wouldn't and couldn't shed a tear for a random passer-by, but it would have the authorities sniffing about. Cover! I wouldn't, and couldn't shed a tear for a random passer-by, but it would have the authorities sniffing about. Cover! A shimmering shield flickered into being between us, the brace of needles clattering against it without so much as rippling the magical barrier. Lesser cover was a rather poor spell, one that could stop a physical projectile easily enough, but it was not exactly a powerful spell. Perhaps I had books in mind when I cast it. It was a cover. Perhaps I had books in mind when I cast it. It was a cover spell, after all. Cover spell. It was a cover spell, after all. Perhaps I should keep on theme. Bind! Ethereal chains appeared in a circle around the two young men, then snapped closed around their arms and legs and head. The one that still stood crashed to the ground under the sudden weight, and the one on the ground continued screaming. I couldn't even block his mouth without fists appearing. I couldn't even block his mouth without first repairing his jaw. I appreciate you removing yourselves from my path, I said as I continued towards the store. Something tugged at my leg. I looked down to find that the girl had grabbed the hem of my pants and was clinging on quite tightly. "Thank you," she said. Yes. You're welcome, and so on. Please let go of my pants. You're so strong, she said. Her face was still pressed up against the road. I am, which would be a valid reason to do as I ask and unhand me. I wiggled my foot a little. The girl looked up. Her face was quite the mess with Kurt daked on? Kurt daked on. Kurt daked on. Her face was quite the mess with Her face was quite the mess, with dirt caked on, and her overly large glasses cracked down the center. Please teach me, she said. No. No. Have a good day. Her hand let go, and I continued. Her hand let go, and I continued on my way. The dog eyed Alex and I warily as we moved on past, not so much as growling. The dog eyed Alex and I warily as we moved on past, not so much as growling. Not so much as growling. Not so much as growling. The shop's door had a quaint little bell affixed to it, announcing our entry into a wonderful world of books and paper. I almost missed my sense of smell. I almost missed my sense of smell. There were some decorative wall scrolls here and there, as well as cubbyhole shelves filled with scrolls all neatly tucked away. Books were stacked onto desks and sitting on shelves, while some lay open and on display, usually on artfully decorated pages with grand maps and such. The proprietor was an older gentleman who merely looked up from his reading of a tome as we entered, then resumed his entertainment. Oh, I missed this, I said to Alex. Now, let's see how this place is organized, I'd usually just take one of the each. Let's see how this place is organized, I'd usually just take one of each book and scroll, but I'd rather not end up with too many trashy novels or the like.
How can I help, Papa?
Alex asked. Why, by holding the books I choose for me. Alex nodded at that. The doorbell jingled again, and I glanced at the entrance to see the young woman stepping in. She had a handkerchief pressed up to her face, but that didn't prevent her from locking onto me. She had a handkerchief pressed up to her face, but that didn't prevent her from locking onto me. You, she said. Did you expect me to teleport away? I asked. No, don't answer that. Instead, go away. What was that Tao you used? She asked. How can I learn that? I had a sinking feeling as I met the young lady's eyes. I had just acquired a limpet. How wonderful. All right, that's the end of Chapter 5. There we go. We are officially halfway through this set. All right. Next question. What is the last thing that you read? Audiobooks count. Read or listened to. What's the last thing that you kind of took in? Besides, like, a news report or something like that. What's the last thing you listened to? Last thing I listened to is a spiritual book by a Canadian Buddhist named Pema Chodron. I don't know if anybody's heard of her, but I'm all about like the spiritual, new age kind of. I love that shit. It just brings me a lot of comfort to learn about how to center myself and be one with myself. All the stuff that actually the main character in this is like, this is complete bullshit. I love all that stuff.
It kind of feels ironic when I'm reading it. You're going to go take care of your twins. Have a good morning. 0 Point, thank you so much for hanging out. All the best to you, your twins, and your animals. And yeah, I look forward to hearing what you think of the rest of Arkhamy and then Dungeon in the Clouds. And yeah, seeing more of you. Thanks for stopping by. Devtron says, Dreadnought's Dead Men's War, Book 2 by Anthony J. Melchiori. I do not know that. That's either a sci-fi book or or not sci-fi. What could it be? Or it's like a fantasy book. But I think Dreadnought Dead Men's War, that sounds like it's sci-fi for some reason. I'm picturing a spaceship. Not dead. Okay, all right. So it's kind of yeah, sci-fi, mech, and aliens. Yeah, okay. More high sci-fi. Cool. Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks awesome. Cool covers. All right, on to chapter 6. Excuse me. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. A limpet and books. I think that in those first few days, that is, the first few days after awakening, I was still operating under the mistaken assumption that the strangers would act in good faith towards someone they didn't know. I've since learned of your staggering arrogance. There we go, get this timing right. That one's no good. That one's no good. That one's no good. I carefully set the book down and turned my attention away from it and to the limpet. Now, I'm aware that she had a name. Most people do. But certain people match their title and station so well that they become it. Such, I felt, was the case with the limpet. Forgive me. That one's no good. That one's no good. Forgive me, I said. But I don't recall asking you for your opinion. The girl shrugged. One hand adjusted the crooked frame of her spectacles. The girl shrugged. One hand adjusted the crooked frame of her spectacles. The girl shrugged, one hand adjusting the crooked frame of her spectacles. The girl shrugged, one hand adjusting the crooked frame of her spectacles. That's okay. I'm just trying to help out. Sorry, but what I meant was that I don't want or desire your help. Go away. Go away. Go away. Sorry, but what I meant was that I don't want or desire your help. Go away. The limpet's mouth worked. Her brows knitting together as she no doubt pushed her thinking ability to its limit. You're forgiven, she said. It took me a moment to parse that. When I said sorry, I wasn't apologizing. It was a comment on how I feel. It was a comment on how I feel sorry about how incredibly pitiful your intelligence is.
It was a comment on how I feel. It was a comment on how I feel sorry about how incredibly pitiful your intelligence is. The girl puffed her cheeks out and had the temerity. The girl puffed her cheeks out and had the temerity to glare. I was just trying to help. No. No. You're trying to ingratiate yourself with me in order to gain an advantage. No, you're trying to ingratiate yourself with me in order to gain an advantage. No, you're trying. No, you're trying to ingratiate yourself with me in order to gain an advantageous position from which to ask me favors. No, you're trying to ingratiate yourself with me in order to gain an... No, you're trying to ingratiate yourself with me in order to gain an advantageous position from which to ask me favors. Notably, you suspect, rightly, that I am in every way more powerful than you, and want some of that power for yourself. And now she was blushing. The limpet reminded me a little of some of the undergraduates I'd conscripted for some research at one time or another. Just barely an adult, and still with some growing to do. Baby-faced and wide-eyed, and most of all, dumb as a rock. Dumb as a rock. Dumb as a rock. Go grind your intelligence by... I don't know, using magic missile on a tree trunk 1,000 times, or whatever it is you youngsters do to train nowadays. Go grind your intelligence by, I don't know, using magic missile on a tree trunk 1,000 times. Go grind your intelligence by, I don't know, using magic missile on a tree trunk 1,000 times, or whatever it is you youngsters do to train nowadays. The girl nodded, then paused. What's magic missile? I no longer had a brain. Well, at least not a physical one, mind you. Mind you? No, I'm not. Mind you? Mind you? Ha! 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 Despite my lack of a meat brain, it seemed that I could still suffer from a headache. Go away! Go away! Go away! I ordered. The limpet squeaked and ran off, jingling the doorbell as she went.
She was nice,
Alex said. Oh, shut up. I huffed. I huffed before returning to my perusal. I huffed before returning to my perusal of the books I had before me. I picked the one I'd just set down and flipped through it, reading the odd page and taking in the diagrams within. I don't know if it was a product of my spectacles translation or if the writing was really as poor as it seemed, but the limpet was correct in her assessment that it wasn't any good. The quality of the books I found were a little strange. To put it simply. The bindings and materials used in their making were actually rather impressive. Not the greatest I'd seen, but the average quality was higher than I would have expected from such a backwater little shop. Not the greatest I'd seen, but the average quality was higher than I would have expected from such a backwater little shop. The scrolls were nothing too special, just rolls of vellum and wooden rods. Occasionally they had some embellishment on their end caps, but that was all. No, the quality of the physical parts of the books was more than satisfying. It was the information that left much to be desired. The history books I found were often accounts told in the forms of ledgers. Some stretched back to the start of some great immortal empire of the 5 paths. That was laughable. If it was immortal and great, I would have run into it already. That was laughable. If it was immortal, that was laughable. If it was immortal and great, I would have run into it already. And from what I could tell, its history only stretched back some millennia and a half to a point where the great empire was little more than a single small kingdom. Pathetic grandstanding and patriotism. Pathetic grandstanding and patriotism, probably designed to give its citizens something to be proud of while they starved on the streets. Probably designed to give its citizens something to be proud of while they starved on the streets. It was disappointing to see that the politics had changed. It was disappointing to see that politics had changed little. It was disappointing to see that politics had changed little. Had changed little. It was disappointing to see that politics had changed little. The history books, as dubious as I found them, were at least sensible. I didn't doubt there was plenty of embellishment and so on, but that was almost to be expected. No, the true cause for concern were the books on the arcane arts. That was the lack of them. There were no less than 62 guides on meditation techniques. There were no less than 62 guides on meditation techniques, a dozen on different martial disciplines for beginners. There were no less than 62 guides on meditation techniques, a dozen on different martial disciplines for beginners, and a few books that looked like class skill books for different combat-oriented skills and feats. Not one book about proper spell casting. That was nonsensical. Even now, with just a minor expansion of my senses, I could feel some weak enchantments layered on the shop, more on the till at the back and plenty beyond that and into the proper city. More on the till at the back and plenty beyond that and into the city proper. More on the till at the back and plenty beyond that and into the city proper. Magic was still very much used here. So why the lack of knowledge? Some possibilities came to mind. 1. Magic had changed. This was the possibility that I suspected had the least potential of being accurate. If magic itself had changed, I suspect I would have noticed already. My entire unlife was sustained by it, and while I had hardly tried spells of my entire unlife was sustained by it, and while I had hardly tried spells of every sort, I had touched upon a few of the more common schools of magic already with no noticeable changes. If magic did change, though, then it was possible that certain magical knowledge was lost. 2. Magic was guarded and kept secret. Not the existence of magic. The limpet had expressed some willingness to learn, so she had to know the basics at least. She didn't act like someone who saw something utterly incomprehensible. So, based on that possible conjecture, magic was known, but the hows of magic were guarded, or at least not sold to the general public in a common bookstore. I truly disliked the idea, but I could imagine a scenario where certain kinds of magic were banned or guarded, and that eventually transitioned. I truly disliked the idea, but I could imagine a scenario where certain kinds of magic were banned or guarded, and that eventually transitioned to all forms of magic over time. I had seen some nations banning necromancy in my day. Not that a law would stop a horde of the undead from storming a gate. 3. I was just really unlucky, and someone else had purchased all of the books pertaining to magic, or this store simply didn't sell that. Maybe there was a magic specialist store somewhere, and the owners agreed not to compete. It was a dull possibility, but a very plausible one. I picked up the first pile of books I had decided. I picked up the first pile of books. I picked up the first pile of the few books I had decided to purchase and set them atop Alex's waiting arms. The second pile masked the butler's face, and the third and fourth couldn't fit atop what he already held without impacting the ceiling, so I waved my hand and summoned a casual mage hand to raise the books off the ground. "Greetings, sir," I said as I approached the man by the counter. He took one look at the piles of books floating behind me and bowed at the waist.
Hello, master. How can Hong Chi assist you this afternoon?
Finally, someone polite. Hello, Hong Chi. I wish to purchase these. I gestured to all the books. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the local currency. I noted the strange expressions flitting by on the man's face.
I do not wish to offend, great master,
he said with a bow.
But I cannot give my books away, else I would lose my livelihood.
Oh, no, I said. Forgive me, I mean that I cannot pay in normal currency. Not that I wouldn't pay. Do you accept gold bullion? Oh, what's going on here? Why aren't you playing? Hello? Let's see here. Bullion. Wouldn't pay. Do you accept gold bullion? Do you accept gold bullion? Do you accept gold bullion? Do you accept gold? Do you accept gold bullion? Do you accept gold bullion? All right, and I reached into one of the pockets of my tweed jacket and rooted around the pocket dimensions within. Pocket dimensions. I reached into one of the pockets of my tweed jacket and rooted around the pocket dimensions within. Pocket dimensions in my pockets. In pocket dimensions in my pockets. Pocket dimensions in my pockets. All right. All right. I found what I sought and pulled out a brick of gold. Is gold still valuable? Is gold still valuable? Is gold still valuable? The man nodded very carefully.
Of course, master, though I must admit that I am not in the habit of trading in gold.
Give yourself a good markup. Give yourself a good markup, I said. Greater transmutation, I said. Greater transmutation was one of those spells that was quite handy in making infinite wealth, insofar as any type of currency other than knowledge was worth something. The man bowed. Greater transmutation was one of those spells that was quite handy in making infinite wealth, insofar as any type of currency other than knowledge was worth something. The man bowed twice, and was soon assisting Alex in setting down all the books I intended to purchase.
You will want these packaged, master. You will want these packaged. You will want these packaged, master?
He asked. That would be nice. Do add their name to the packaging. I dislike rummaging around in a disorganized heap.
I understand fully, my lord,
he said. Soon, the shopkeeper was carefully wrapping each book in plain paper and writing the name of the tome with a brush and ink. He included a short description beneath that on the packaging. It was a good job. Tell me, I said as I set a second golden brick next to the first, where might one acquire magical tomes?
Magical tomes? I suppose master speaks of books that instruct one on the use of cultivation?
That was the second time I'd... Whoa! That was too loud. That was the second time I'd heard the word. Forgive my ignorance, I said. I'm speaking through a translation enchantment. What is cultivation? I was using a spell, but enchantments seemed more common and less likely to raise suspicion.
It's, the practice of an art to gain... The practice of an art to gain chi and become more powerful.
Did he mean gain experience? Gaining experience? Was this cultivation thing just grinding? I see, I said. I suspected that there was more to it than that. But I would learn more when I had the time for it. And where could I find out more about magic?
The local sect would be the best place if they're willing to accept you. They are, I wouldn't speak ill of them. Perhaps master would be best to hire guards and leave his riches behind when he visits the local sect, just in case.
I nodded in thanks. I'll see what I can do, I said. I'd long grown past the point of fearing for my unlife, but if this kind book vendor was willing to warn me, perhaps I would heed his word. I wondered if there was a cemetery nearby. I noticed Hong Chi looking past me and towards the entrance of his shop. A quick glance over my shoulder didn't reveal any fools. A quick glance over my shoulder didn't reveal any young fools looking for a second lesson, but instead the head of a limpet. The head of a limpet that quickly disappeared when she saw me staring.
Please, master, don't be hard on Fen Feng,
Hong Chi said.
If she bothers you, I will speak to her.
She seems unfortunately persistent, I said.
It must be because the master seems so powerful, he said. She's been looking for her own path to cultivation for some time, but with little luck.
Are there not goblins to murder around here? I asked.
Well, yes, he said. But they are fearsome and warped by evil energies.
I assumed that evil energies was some necromantic power or other, else the locals were just needlessly superstitious. I won't harm her, if that's what you're asking. Not as long as she doesn't bother me overly much. Maybe I'd teleport her. Maybe I'd teleport her over the lake. Next to a boat, of course. Once all the books were nice and packed, I added a final golden ingot to the pile. Better to overpay and remain on friendly terms with the man. Better to overpay and remain on friendly terms with the man providing me with my entertainment. There you go. You guys keep that in mind, eh? Just kidding. Terms with the man providing me with my entertainment. I think this will be my farewells for now. I think this will be my farewells for now, I said. Hong-Chi bowed once more.
It was a pleasure serving you, Master.
Certainly. No, I don't know why I have a British accent now. Certainly. Have a good evening. I waved my hand, and the neatly packed books warped and wavered before folding away into my bookkeeping dimension. It also doubled as my accounting dimension. It also doubled as my accounting dimension. It also doubled as my accounting dimension. Come on, Alex, we've a sect to visit. I said. New, or perhaps very old, magics to discover. And one limpet to get rid of.
Yes, Papa Magic Bones,
Alex said as he jumped to follow me.
Are we getting clothes too?
Oh, yes, I had quite forgotten. Yes, I had quite forgotten. I nodded along. Alex was still dressed in pauper's clothes, hardly fit for a butler at all. Books and magic first, clothes second. We do have some priorities. Oh, I'm having so much fun with this book. And chapter 6. Beauty. All right, so that's about 45 more narrated minutes. Maybe I can do one more today. All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and take a little break, but I'm going to leave you with the first chapter of this book, which should be about 15 minutes, and I will be back momentarily. So if you're listening to this back and forth, or if you're listening to this, pardon me, brain is not working, I need oxygen. If you're listening to this in order, you can probably just skip ahead. But if you haven't heard the first chapter, here it is. Chapter 1. A Rude Awakening. I can imagine what's going through your head right now. Maybe if I stay very quiet, the scary Lich person won't kill me, and my friends will have enough time to come and save me. It's a very quaint thought. Your friends could never save you, though I must admit there is some validity to the former claim. If you stay very quiet and listen very well, you will get to live. A little longer, at least. I, like many others, enjoy a good night's rest. Undeath never truly changed this. It only made the periods between rests that much longer. The magical sleep I was in, the one that I chose to succumb to, was not your average rest, though. It was a deeper thing, more primordial, closer to the essence of sleep than sleep itself. Magic wove itself into the concept of sleep and rest and eternal slumber and made it something more. Which is probably why I was a bit miffed when someone rattled my bones and woke me up. My eyes flickered into being, and for a moment in the darkness, all I could see was a youthful face lit by torchlight. Inquisitive eyes lingered on me, and a hand quite rudely pressed up against my face. I may have acted on an instinct that was a bit uncouth at that moment. My jaw cracked open, teeth parting for the first time in however long I had rested there, and words escaped my non-existent lips in a sibilant whisper. Drain life. Ah, that had been a bit of a mistake. I am aware that you, a mundane person, might not know all that much about magic. Fortunately, I'm something of an expert on the matter. The only one greater than I was Zaloth, the god of magic. At least Zaloth was greater than I, until I used a nifty spell to drain his divinity, then consumed his essence to empower that's a story for another time. Forgive me, I do tend to ramble. Now, let me explain why that was a mistake. You see, casting, at least in the proper traditional style, demands a few things from the caster. You need gestures and motions, the right words and incantations. Often you need the right reagents, so that the magic will be imbued with unique properties. When I cast Drain Life, I was actually casting a spell called Greater Word of Death, Drain Existence. Quite a handy little spell. It attacked the subject on a conceptual level. I derived it from a Drain Soul spell I found in some forgotten tomb. The common Drain Life was an old favorite of mine, so I got into the awful habit of just using that as a shorthand. See, it's a mistake for two reasons. One, it's terribly lazy casting, wasteful, and for the most part a bit much. It's like burning down a city because a single shapeshifter stole one of your books. Two, the young man standing above me, suddenly faced with a point-blank spell designed to remove his very existence, died rather quickly. Had I skin and such, I might have been a little distraught at all the dust falling on me as the boy's everything turned into nothing. But the only thing annoying me was my own foolhardiness. I could have questioned the young punk. Cancel! Reality stopped eating away at the boy's body, and what was left of it flopped to the ground next to my coffin. That left me on my back, laying upon a no doubt rather chilly piece of magic-carved stone, and staring at a cracked and time-ravaged ceiling. As my father used to say, there's no time like the present. Of course, once I discovered how to stop time, I always found the saying a little facetious. It was more accurate to say, there's no time but the present. Nevertheless, I set aside my ramblings and tilted my head up to see what was what. The top of my tomb had been slid aside, leaving only a passage large enough for some foolish young punk to stick his head where it didn't belong. I corrected this oversight with a wiggle of a bony finger. Lesser Mage's Hand. 8 ephemeral hands appeared around the lid of my coffin, and slowly, carefully raised it up and set it off to one side. The advantage of a mage's hand, other than not having to move oneself over to pick something up, is that it is quite impossible to pinch one's fingers off. A very handy spell. I extricated myself from my place of not-so-eternal-after-all rest and stood up next to the body of the young man that had disturbed me. My burial chamber was in a bit of a state. The walls were cracked, with some of those splits running right through the runes and enchantments meant to keep the place spotless. Having never been one for grand displays of wealth, any jewels and gems and golden gilding was merely there to satisfy the needs of some enchantments. There was little else in the room but my crypt and a small bench off to one side that I had once used to tie my shoes. Any jewels and gold and other such ornamentation were merely part of the magical systems keeping everything functional. Ah! Speaking of, before laying myself down for the long rest, I had, of course, properly enchanted my clothes. A glance downwards revealed that these enchantments had held marvelously. My Oxfords were still shiny and new, with a neat pair of double bows atop them. My slacks, though, could have used a bit of ironing. They were a pinch rumpled around the hem. I supposed that my ankles were a bit bony. Bony! Oh, my sense of humor was quite lively, even after all this time. I ran my fingers down my favorite tweed jacket, the one with the big pockets and the leather pads over the elbows, then inspected my button-up shirt and the vest covering it. All nice and neat. Finally, I tugged my bow tie straight and reassured myself that even after all this time, I seemed like a proper gentleman. I was ready for a showing. Unfortunately, there didn't seem to be any heroes charging into my chamber as I had imagined, nor did the 3/4 of a young man by my feet seem to have many friends. There was a bag off to one side, no doubt filled with knickknacks, and a torch lay on the ground off to the side, spitting and burning away while casting a needless amount of light around. A bit of a listen revealed that there was some wind coming from the far end of the room, and certainly enough, there was a fissure just big enough for someone to sneak through. I wondered. I snuck my fingers into my waist pocket and pulled out my trusty old stopwatch. It was a nice thing, with a simple silver case and a finely wrought chain. I wasn't one for embellishments and decorations and such. I preferred cold functionality, and I think my watch showed as much. I flicked the device open, and as the name suggested, stopped time. A bit of an interesting project, that one. Fortunately, it also served as a very handy little pocket watch, and you quite literally had all the time in the world to see what time it was when using it. A flick on one of the buttons stopped the running count that I'd set off before going to sleep. Ethereal numbers appeared in the air before me. 6.63E plus 10. That was quite a few seconds. Had I a tongue, I would have pinched it between my teeth as I worked out the math. Some 21 centuries and a year and change. The exact day and month hardly mattered. In all likelihood, a few megaspells would have tossed the planet out of whack by some fraction of a degree and made any accurate calendar null and void. I snapped my watch shut and slid it back into its pocket. 2 millennia and a bit. Not nearly as long as I had intended to sleep. I suppose I could have gone back to sleep right then and there. The spells I'd need to cast to return were a little tricky, but to me it felt like I had cast them just the night before. But that would just lead to some other young fool poking at my tomb. No, I had some questions that needed answering. Seeing as the only other person in the room with me had suffered from some critical existence failure, I had to pursue other avenues of research and discovery. I began with the man's bags. A tent, some spare clothes, a few strips of salted meat wrapped in cloth, 2 glass bottles filled with water, a camp knife and a flint, all the essentials someone on an adventure would need to keep a minimal level of comfort. It was near the bottom of the bag, past a few other odds and ends, such as a small shaving kit and some dried herbs in a small porcelain container, medication, perhaps, that I found the true prize. A book. A well-bound book, even. Thumb-thick, about a handspan wide and twice that in height. The paper was some sort of vellum I wasn't entirely familiar with. The ink seemed organic, and the binding made of tightly knotted strands of leather that had been cured to remain flexible. A well-made book. It warmed my decrepit old soul to see that education was still a priority, even in this distant future. There was, of course, a title imprinted on the very first page. And I'm back. Hello, everybody. Thank you for waiting, and let us continue. I'm going to do one more chapter of this here book called Dead Tired, and then that's it for part 2. We're going to do part 3 tomorrow. And yeah, then it's going to be off. This set will be done. It'll be off to Dory Sachs, who's going to be narrating or doing the voice of Fenfang, and then a couple other characters later on, and very excited for that. But if you're still here, say hello, pop into the chat, form the crew, unite. Who do we have? Thank you everybody who's been hanging out and staying. This is really awesome. I'm particularly excited about Devtron and his new VR setup. That's really cool. Just being able to watch a stream, and then being able to play a video game, and then being able to, it's just awesome. So, yeah, all right, keep going. Chapter 7. Excuse me. Chapter 7. A picture of the wider world. I must say, your people's dedication to martial arts is impressive, but growth in martial disciplines is linear. Wizards are quadratic. I can help, the limpet said the very moment Alex and I stepped out of the bookstore. I looked down at the limpet, taking full advantage of the added height gained by standing atop the first step leading into the shop to pin her in place. The girl cringed back. I, as always, had options. Acting without consideration was not in my nature as a man of science. I, as always, had options. Acting without considering was not in my nature as a man of science. I could teleport the girl over the lake, perhaps by casting Yeetus Annoyus, a spell developed by an old colleague to dismiss certain students of his, to fling her away harmlessly. On the other hand, she was a local. She might know a few things about the area. She might know a few things about the area that I couldn't learn through casual observation alone. I could always interrogate her now and fling her into the lake later. Either way, she'd get flung into the lake for annoying me, but the latter meant that I'd at least get some use out of her. The dog next to her stared up at me, its tail between its legs and its eyes narrowed with dog-like suspicion. Does anybody here know Raven's Dagger? Is anybody like a member of the Discord, or what have you? Because I thought I saw something. Raven's Dagger is an artist. I'm gonna message him right now, actually. Eyes narrowed with dog-like suspicion. To her stared. I really like that line. The dog next to her stared up at me, its tail between its legs, and its eyes. The dog next to her stared up at me, its tail between its legs, and its eyes narrowed with dog-like suspicion. I wondered if it would be foolish enough to try to attack me. That would be the last thing it did while alive if it did so. I was more of a cat person. What's your name? What's your name? I asked. I'm Fenfang, the limpet said. I said. And this guy's name is Fang. Hmm. She said as she gave the dog a friendly pat on the head. You named your dog after yourself? You named your dog after yourself? I asked. She nodded and smiled up at me. Yep. Even I wasn't that full of myself. Well, Limpet, you can follow me up to the Four Venoms compound and tell me about the area and its history. Her eyes lit up. Really? Is this a test? A test of my patience, perhaps? Aha! Ha ha! Oh! Let's go with that, I said, before gesturing off towards the far end of town. You can start by telling me the fastest route to get to the compound, and then tell me what happened to those two young men that were here earlier. The streets were still alive. The streets were still as alive as they had been when I arrived. More so, perhaps. There was no sign of the two young men that Alex and I had taken care of earlier. Yes, sir, the limpet said. Right this way. She dipped down to pick up a satchel and slung it over her shoulder. Judging by the boxy outlines poking through the leather bag, it was filled with quite a few books. So, child, are you a mage? An aspiring wizard, perhaps? Are you a mage? An aspiring wizard, perhaps? I asked. If she was an adept, then that would open up entirely new avenues to question her through before I tossed her into the lake. If she was an adept, then that would open up entirely new avenues to question her through. Excuse me. If she was an adept, then that would open up entirely new avenues to question her through before I tossed her into the lake. A wizard? A wizard? Like those in the Imperial Court? The limpet asked. She adjusted her glasses with the palm of her hand, then shook her head. No, I wish. Finding that kind of path to cultivation? Oh, that would be incredible. Is that what Mister is? A wizard? My appearance under my current illusion certainly didn't give the impression that I was any sort of fighter. Yes, I said. I am a wizard. It even had the benefit of being true. The limpet's eyes shone. So incredible! Are you looking for an apprentice? I might be, I said. Perhaps some decades down the line I would look for an apprentice. I doubted it, though. In all likelihood, I'd exhaust my curiosity and return to my nearly eternal sleep before long. Now, enough about that. Tell me about this town and this sect. The limpet's mouth worked, then she nodded seriously and straightened her back. This is Venom's End, she said. How did you come here without knowing that? I'm sorry, are you the one asking questions now? I asked. The limpet flinched. Sorry, I'm not being a very good apprentice, am I? No, you're not. I agreed. My question? One moment. She paused to rummage through her satchel, soon coming out with a small notepad and a charcoal pencil. Let me just note down your questions so that I can answer all of them. I nodded. That was sensible.
You're very organized. You're very organized. You're very organized,
Alex said. Limpet nodded. That I am. I might have been kicked out of 7 sects, but not once because I'm not a hard worker. What are these sects, anyway? What are these sects, anyway? I asked. She scribbled down the question beneath the others. She scribbled down the question beneath the others. Okay, first question. This town is called Venom's End. It's run by the Four Venoms sect, which is in turn run by the Grandmaster Wei Yuan of the Coiling Serpent. The Limpet's pencil scratched a line across the question. Question 2. The 2 disciples were carried off by the local physician's place. Lesser disciples need to pay for their own care, so they can't just return to the compound. Another scratched off line. Another scratched off line. Question 3. Sects, what are they? That's a hard one to answer. I am sure Mr. knows. I may have an idea, I said. Are you one of the Grand Masters? Oops, I think that's supposed to say grand. She asked. Wait, no questions. Sorry. Right. So, the 16 sects are all schools that teach different forms of cultivation. Some are really secretive, others are less so and will accept anyone. If you're really good, you can transfer from sect to sect to learn all of their secrets and arts, and if you do that, you can join the 17th sect at the Jade Seat, or to even become a guard of the throne. You're rambling, I said. We were making decent time crossing the city. Venom's End, which was an objectively terrible name, wasn't all that big, and we had started near the center, so our uphill trek to the compound that housed the Four Venoms sect wasn't very far. Sorry, Limpet said. I do that a lot. A lot. Anyway, a sect is an organization built around the teaching of a single cultivation art. Sometimes it'll do more than that, like worship a kami, or have some duties beyond just teaching. But mostly it's about the art and the betterment of the empire. And how do these schools differ? I asked. The Limpet scribbled the question down. Each school teaches a variation on the art of the Tao. The 16 are all divided by element, earth, water, fire, and wind, so most of their skills center around one of those. The Four Venoms school teaches the poison arts and alchemy. The others, do you want me to go through all 16? No, I said. No, I said. As interesting as her rambling was, it was still rambling, and I was growing tired of it. I would probably learn a lot more from the books I'd collected, and was about to collect from this. I would probably learn a lot more from the books I'd collected, and was about to collect from this Four Venoms sect. That the sect was a tool of a larger government was reassuring. That meant that they likely had a bureaucracy in place to accommodate my needs. On the other hand, the city seemed poorly run, which didn't bode well for that same system. I have a map, the Limpet said. She turned halfway around and started to rummage through her bag. And then, because she was as clumsy as she was loud, she tripped over her own foot and went flying. Alex dipped down, both hands snapping out and catching the girl mid-tumble.
Careful! Oh! Careful! Oh! Careful, small annoying one! Careful, small annoying one!
Oh, thank you.
Careful, small annoying one!
Oh, the Limpet said. She was blushing quite profoundly as she extricated herself from Alex's arms. Here's my map. she declared, as if she hadn't nearly smashed her face even more. I had the illusion before my face raise an eyebrow as I took a rolled piece of parchment from the limpet and held it up before me. "Is this thing accurate?" I asked, as I took in the rough shape of the continent. It was similar to what I could remember, more or less. The sea levels might have changed, and some islands were outright missing, though that could have been due to poor map-making. The main crux of the map wasn't the locations of cities. It pointed instead to various sects across the empire. Hardly secretive if they had their locations printed on a map. Or maybe these were red herrings. "It's more or less accurate," the limpet said. "I didn't pay much for it, and I might have gotten a bit lost a few times. But, well, it got me here." "You've traveled a lot." I asked. "I really want to grow strong and fierce," she said, with all the strength and ferocity of a mangy puppy. "That's nice," I said. This map may prove useful." "You can keep it if you want," the limpet said. "That's generous. Thank you." Looking up, I found that we had arrived onto the street that led to the Four Venoms compound. It was actually an impressive place, with tall walls of fitted stone painted in stark white and capped with a tiled roof all around. The taller buildings, all with pagoda-like roofs, poked out. Above the walls and seemed to be in good repair, especially compared to the city around us. Not that the area around the compound was poor. It seemed as if this was the place where the richer citizens lived. Two young men were at the gate, both in the flowing garbs that I took to be some sort of uniform worn by the Four Venoms sect. They were eyeing us, only the top half of their faces visible over their high-collared outfits. I turned around and looked out over the city. From the height we were at, I could see all the way over to the lake where, in the distance, a few boats were navigating back to the harbor. Perhaps the fishermen returned for lunch? "This is it," the limpet said. "They, might have kicked me out earlier this week after I failed their initiation." I was curious, but not enough to really ask. It wasn't as if I intended to try and pass any sort of test here. "That's nice," I said. Say, have you ever been teleported before?" "No," she said. "Wait, Mister can teleport?" "Obviously. Do you know how to swim?" "Obviously. Do you know how to swim?" I would feel a very slight pang of something akin to guilt if she drowned.
"I do,"
she said.
"You need to learn if you want to join the sect of the Storm Lake. They still failed me, though."
"And the dog?"
"Fang knows how to swim, too," she said.
"Ah, brilliant," I said. Reaching down, I tapped at her satchel and drew a quick rune into the side with a cantrip. I tapped at her satchel and drew a quick rune into its side with a cantrip for engraving leather.
"What are you doing?"
she asked. "Ah. Waterproofing enchantment, I said. I wouldn't want your books to get wet."
She blinked at me in a very limpet-ish way. Huh? I poked her head and touched her dog. In reply. Teleport! They both disappeared, quite satisfyingly.
Oh, look!
Alex said while pointing out towards the lake. I glanced over just in time to see twin splashes near a boat and could just barely catch her distressed scream in the air. Good show, I said. And good riddance. Now, let's go see about this sect and what knowledge it holds. All right, there we go. That's the end of Chapter 7. You know what? I think I might have some more juice left in me, so... Oof, let's see. Ooh, am I able to get through 2 more chapters? If I can get through 2 more chapters... Oh, hold on. No, I'm an idiot. I don't know why I thought that I was at... What, a 200? So there's 60, 80, 200. 4 more chapters left. All right. So I'll have set 1 done tomorrow, and that's pretty good. All right. Let me just get some oxygen here. Five, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 5, 1, 5, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 5, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 5, 1, 5, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. What? Oh. Sometimes that's what you gotta do. Sometimes that's just what you gotta do. Sometimes you just gotta make that noises, but I'm a modern rapper, yo, ho, yo, no. You like my rap? Oh, there's my ding. Gonna save this. You have to save. It's just like a video game, you know? Quick save. When you're working on a audiobook, got a quick save. Right? Don't forget, press that F5. F5 all day. F5 all day. All right. I gotta keep going, because why the hell not, you know? Sometimes you just gotta keep on narrating when you're in the flow, and I am in that flow. What do you know? Let's go. Chapter 8. A Failure of Guest Rights. Do you know what I miss the most about the old world? The observation skill. It used to be that nearly everyone had it, and while your level wasn't the most important thing about you, it did engender a certain amount of caution. A low-leveled person likely needed protection. A high-level one deserved some amount of respect. Nice and simple. A low-leveled person likely needed protection. A high-level one deserved some amount of respect. Nice and simple. I would like to think that I'm no fool. My max intelligence stat suggested as much, but that couldn't be relied upon as a But that couldn't be relied upon as a be-all, end-all for deciding how smart someone actually was. No matter how intelligent you are, you can be defeated by someone more observant, more patient, or perhaps someone who is simply more ruthless than you are. It's why taking things slowly and carefully, more often than not, is the best way to do things. It's why I took my time climbing to the top of the hill where the gate of the compound waited. Observe! Observe!
A follower. A follower of the toad. A follower of the toad sage, poisoner, level 41. A snake's fang, assassin, level 39.
The two young men by the gate seemed rather cautious as we approached. Not fearful, but also not nearly as arrogant as the young men Alex and I had met so far. Not fearful, but also not nearly as arrogant as the young men Alex and I had met so far. Their classes, poisoner and assassin, respectively hinted at a singular purpose and fighting style. As for their level, it was rather low. Perhaps they chose lower ranked, but more mature individuals as gate guards, or maybe the importance of the job had been impressed upon otherwise normal young men. "Greetings," I said as I had my illusory face smile kindly upon the men. My name is Harold. I'm a traveling researcher. I was hoping I could speak to the sect's librarian, or, barring that, your head of research." The assassin stepped forward and gave Alex and myself a shallow bow.
Honored guests. Do you have an invitation to enter the Four Venom sect?
I'm afraid not, I said. I'm merely here to study the local magics. If it helps any, I can afford to pay your group for the trouble. I fished out a smaller gold bar from my pocket, on account that gold was worthless to me, especially when compared to knowledge. For some reason, this had the young man before me bristling with indignity.
You think you can merely buy the secrets? Of the Four Venom sect? Honored guests, you think you can merely buy the secrets of the Four Venom sect?
If I didn't at least suspect as much, I wouldn't have made the offer, I said.
Who are you? Who are you to insult the Four Venoms? Who are you to insult the Four Venom sect? Who are you to insult? Who are you? Who are you to insult the Four Venom sect? The poisoner asked.
It seemed as if his patience was running out.
Four Venom sect? Who are you to... Who are you? Who are you to insult? Who are you to insult? Who are you? Who are you to insult the Four Venom sect? Who are you to insult the Four Venom sect? Who are you to insult the Four Venom sect? The poisoner asked.
It seemed as if his patience was running out. We'd barely even begun talking. I believe I've covered this already. I'm Harold. I gestured past them and to the gate. It was a decent doorway, made of... some old wood and reinforced with steel studs, most engraved with serpents and worms. They very obviously took their image seriously here.
Who's he? Who's he? Who's he? Who's he?
The assassin asked while pointing to Alex. That's my butler, Alex.
Hello, I'm Alex.
Why does he have those ears? Is he demon-blooded? The poisoner asked. He slid his hands into the sleeves of his coat. No doubt he was reaching for a weapon. This was all going rather poorly. More like he's part leopard, I said. Now, is there a procedure for entering the sect? If I can't merely pay my way in, there must be some way to enter. Pay my way in, there must be some way to enter.
You are too old to join,
the assassin said. I'm not looking to join, I said. I'm looking for knowledge. The two guards looked to each other and seemed to communicate something between themselves with a few twitches and shrugs.
I will get a senior disciple, the poisoner said.
He bowed once more, even more shallowly if that meant anything, then raced back into the compound by way of a small door next to the main gate. Well, hopefully that will resolve things, I said. I've never been fond of the get-the-manager approach, but if it works, it works. It took surprisingly little time for the poisoner to return, now accompanied by a slightly older man, though he could hardly be past his mid-20s.
Who are you to interrupt my afternoon meal and meditation?
He asked. I had my illusion's eyebrows rise up. I'm Harold. Do forgive the disturbance. I'm merely here to visit your sect's library. The senior disciple stood taller and stuck his nose into the air.
Who are you to...
The senior disciple...
Why are you not bowing in apology?
He asked. I had to take a moment to parse that. I'm sorry. What?
You, peasant, have interrupted my meal for some menial reason. Why are you not kneeling for forgiveness?
Just to be entirely certain, I looked down upon myself, inspecting my clothes and making sure my illusion was still in place. I still looked like a middle-aged gentleman. Not a 12-year-old. It seems that there's some misunderstanding here. I said. I merely want to visit your library. The man swung an open palm at me. I had plenty of time to consider. What to do as the slap came for my face. I could have ended his life for the temerity of it. In fact, that was growing to be a rather favorable option. On the other hand, killing someone was unlikely to get me to see their library peacefully. Alex caught the man's wrist mid-swing and held it in place in an iron grip.
Please do not hit Papa Bones, It would be very rude.
Thank you, Alex, I said, while the senior disciple struggled to free himself. Now, as I was saying, I am ready to offer you and your sect some financial remuneration in exchange for the right to peruse your library. I won't even take any of your texts out of the room. If that's what you wish. I'd instead use a spell to copy them for later reading. I'm hardly without means, and I don't want any ill will between us. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. I gestured, and Alex let go of the man's hand.
You! I will tell the upper disciples of this! You will regret it!
I watched the man scurry off back into the compound, then turned to the 2 gate guards. Are all of the senior disciples that ignorant? They didn't quite seem to know what to do. So I sighed and gestured to their gate. I'm going to enter the compound now, I said.
Guests must enter from the main gate only, the assassin said.
I had my illusion roll its eyes. Traditions. Disgusting wastes of time and energy. The gate was obviously reinforced with a few enchantments. Some utilitarian, to prevent rust and decay, others to make it stronger or resistant to magical tampering. It wasn't the most impressive work I'd seen, but it was decent in an amateurish way. The walls around the gate were completely plain. It was such a foolish mistake to make that I found myself shaking my head in disappointment. Enlarge! The walls surrounding the gate expanded a few millinecrometers. The walls surrounding the gate expanded a few millinecrometers in every direction, tearing apart the gate's hinges as they remained the same size. The walls surrounding the gate expanded a few millinecrometers in every direction, tearing apart the gate's hinges as they remained the same size. The entire gate thumped to the ground, then slowly, gently, tipped back to crash into the ground with a great gust of displaced air and a ground-shaking thud. I stepped past the 2 gate guards, who seemed somewhat uncertain as to what to do now that they had no gate to guard, and moved into the open courtyard that made up the center of the compound. It seemed as though the area was laid out in a rough square, with taller buildings on every corner, long, low structures along the vertices, and the far end of the compound was home to the largest building I had seen in the region. And the far end of the compound was home to the largest building I had yet seen in the region, a 4-story tower with tiled roofs that stood tall and proud over the others. Small rock gardens decorated the sides, and I noted some pads for people to kneel upon while meditating. Small rock gardens decorated the sides, and I noted some pads for people to kneel upon while meditating. A large gathering of young people, both male and female, were standing off to one side in light clothes, covered in sweat, while an instructor paused in the act of teaching them something. His lesson seemed to have been cut short by my entrance. I was genuinely surprised by the number of people in the sect. I had expected a few dozen at most, but there were easily 100. out and about, and no doubt more working within the various buildings. "Do forgive me," I said, pitching my voice so as to be heard. "Do forgive me! Do forgive me!" I said. "Do forgive me!" I said, pitching my voice so as to be heard. "I would like to speak to your leader, if I may. I would like to speak to your leader, if I may. I would like to speak to your leader, if I may."
Him! Him!
Randy Moore asks, how do you switch between tracks so quickly? There's a couple of methods, but basically I've got key bindings to each track so that I can arm different tracks at the press of a button. I use the numpad of my keyboard. I've got a quiet touch keyboard here so it doesn't make much noise. Some people use a Stream Deck. Jeff uses a Stream Deck, and it's pretty quiet as well. I like this better because then I can also switch over and use it as a keyboard as well. Doesn't take as much programming as the Stream Deck does either. But that's just me. And then just practice. I've been narrating this way for about 7 years, so it gets under the keys and is a lot more manageable. Or gets under your fingers, rather. Devtron asks, is there a link ready for this book so I can wish list it or pre-order it? Unfortunately, not yet. Though, that is something for me to consider. I will think about whether or not we could, start a pre-order really, really early. It's just a matter of if, there's a delay in production for whatever reason, we want to make sure that we want to make sure that we can actually make the date so that if you pre-order for, December 1st, that is actually going to be ready for December 1st. It's, there's a lot that can happen in between now and then, so... but yeah, that's something, I think maybe a pre-order would be a good idea for this one.
Him!
The senior disciple said as he pointed quite rudely at me. He was with a gathering of other older members of the sect, all around his own age. He was with a gathering of other older members of the sect, all around his own age. He was with a gathering of other older members of the sect, all around his own age, save for one who seemed... He was with a gathering of other older members of the sect. He was with a gathering of other older members of the sect, all around his own age, save for one who seemed quite a bit older. I hadn't noticed at first, but now that there were more sect members around, it was hard to miss the fact that they had a visible system of ranks. The lowest seemed to be very young, all dressed in clean but unembellished. The lowest seemed to be very young, all dressed in clean but unembellished clothes, many with shawls around their shoulders. Above them were who I presumed to be, junior disciples. These had the familiar jackets with long sleeves and high collars. There was little variation in their manner of dress. The senior disciples wore similar clothes. But often with faint enchantments woven in, and with more gilding and decorations. Also, they seemed to have more variations in their dress, from slightly different cuts to unique weapons by their hips or on their backs. And finally, the instructors, and what I presumed to be the equivalent of leaders, and finally, the instructors, and what I presumed to be the equivalent of leaders and professors. They wore longer, fuller robes, split to allow for movement, and with hoods that cast their heads in deep shadow. Browns and blacks seemed to be the color of choice, perhaps because of a lack of materials, or maybe because they wished to better hide in the local wilderness. I was beginning to suspect that this sect was rather militarized in nature, more so than religious. I was beginning to suspect that this sect was rather militarized in nature, more so than religious. The older man that the seniors were gathered around stepped up and took position in the middle. The older man that the seniors were gathered around stepped up and took position in the middle of the courtyard.
Kneel and press your head to the ground. We will make your death painless if you do so.
I'm going to redo this line.
The older man that the seniors were gathered around stepped up and took position in the middle of the courtyard.
Kneel and press your head to the ground. We will make your death painless if you do so. You will die with dignity and at the hand of one of my more peaceful concoctions.
I shook my head. Do forgive me about the door. I can repair it in but a moment. I may have acted rashly there.
I did not ask for your excuses. I did not ask for excuses. I asked you if you wished to die. I asked you if you wished to die easily,
the man said. I truly doubt any of you could manage to kill me, so please do away with the threats. I'm just here to see the...
Seniors! This fool... Seniors! This fool does not respect the Four Venom sect, he said. Show him pain!
Sir Papa Bone Herald, Alex asked. Should I escort them off their mortal coils? Should I escort them off of their mortal coils?
I sighed. Only if they're so rude as to assault us. Only if they're so rude as to assault us, Alex. Only if they're so rude as to assault us, Alex. 5 senior disciples moved up, including the rude one we had met outside. I could guess what would happen next. It was rather disappointing to see otherwise talented young men commit themselves to actions like these without thought. It was rather disappointing to see otherwise talented young men commit themselves to actions like these without thought. The entire sect seemed to think that this was some sort of show. The younger members eagerly whispered among themselves, and some juniors poked their heads out of windows. The five arrayed before me puffed up, and one by one they called out their names and titles. I was thousands of years old, and had literally marched armies of the undead into battles against war gods, and even I didn't have titles as silly as these young men. The most venomous striking fang of the serpent, and he who erodes the darkness with virility were the ones that stuck out to me the most. I suspected that they were given such ridiculous titles as a means of instilling some humility in them. It might have failed. "Are you quite done?" I asked. And then they decided to make the last mistake they would commit while still alive. And then they decided to make the last mistake they would commit while still alive. They attacked. They attacked. They attacked. They attacked. You'd like to pre-order some of these books, and I almost never can. You should add to the website a pre-order for live narration, or at least an ability to wish list. Yeah, so this would be... Oh, by the way, that's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 8. Rename that. And I think my voice is pretty much done. I think I need to stop on this title and take a break. Maybe come back at noon. But yeah, so Devtron says that we should add the website, add a pre-order to the website for live narration, or at least the ability to wish list. So we do have something in place now where you're able to purchase the whole series on the Sound Booth Theater app or the website at a discounted price. So if we know, okay, we're going to be producing, 6 books in Dead Tired, we could say, you're going to, well, maybe that's a bad example, but if you want to buy the whole Dungeon Crawler Carl cinematic, you could do that. And yeah, download that and, purchase that, get a little discount rather than if you'd paid for them individually. And then you, whenever there's a new episode, you'll get that. So that's something that's implemented for some of our titles, but as you know, a lot of our titles go straight to Audible, and we have a lot less control over what happens at Audible. It is an interesting idea. I do kind of like the idea of having like a initial, get this on Sound Booth Theater before it goes to Audible sort of thing. The problem with that is that if you guys really want this Dead Tired book and you buy it on Sound Booth Theater and then you don't get it on Audible, then that means that we are going to lose a lot of the momentum that we would get on Audible if we had, if we'd asked for, if you had bought it from Audible in the first place. It would affect the rankings of the title and how much is purchased. So anyways, that is a little bit about that, but we are kind of implementing stuff for our own releases, which is cool. So, everybody, I need to stop talking. My voice is getting a bit raw. I don't know if you can hear it. So that's where I want to end this in order not to affect the quality. I'm going to do a little save here. And I just want to say thank you guys very much for hanging out. I'm going to be doing one more session tomorrow of Dead Tired, so definitely, keep your eyes peeled for that tomorrow morning. I'm going to aim for around 8:30 again, but it might be a bit earlier. We'll see how I'm feeling tomorrow. What else can I say? Join the Discord, Sound Booth Theater Live Discord. Link is in the comments or in the description. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. This has been a great stream. A lot of people showed up and had a nice crew here listening in. So Devtron, Randy Moore, oh gosh, who else was there? There was 0 Point, Orestes was here. There was a great crew of people, Edward P. So thank you for hanging out, and we will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're here already, you probably have liked and subscribed this video, but just another reminder, it always helps us out and gets our streams out there more so we can get bigger titles and better titles and interact with you more at the end of the day. So thank you again. Love you all, and have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Now, how do I close out of this stream? Go to StreamYard and end stream. So long, everyone.